Hey everybody, it's Bryndan Moore. Welcome to the Black Futurist Podcast. I'm shooting live today, recording this moment in Mexico City, Mexico. My first time hanging out with a great friend down here. And I just want to talk about the special nature of this episode you're about to see and about to hear. This is the first episode of the Black Futurist that I actually do not appear in. Instead, two incredible educators came on to answer my question. What is the future of education, given the innovations that we're seeing today, like AI, quantum computing, robotics, etc.? How should education change in order to facilitate the country's and our students' ability to thrive in the new environment? So I brought on two guests, Dr. Hannah Oldham and Dr. Nia Abdullah, to answer the only question I ever ask on this show, is when you're wildly successful at what you're doing, in this case, educating the country, how does our world change? Take a listen.
And we talk about like having access to 3D printers and things like that. But I think one of the things that we need to make sure that we're doing is like all of those things are great, but it's the soft, non-standard skills that create our future innovators.
Right.
Making them feel safe to
fail.
To
fail. Absolutely.
And knowing that you're not going to innovate unless you fail, and failure should be celebrated.
Then really thinking about how can we help teachers really create these open-ended projects where there's no clear right and wrong answer. It's all about the methods. It's all about the innovation. It's all about learning new information and then building off of that information, helping to steer the research or the innovation in a new direction. So it's not just, here's the right answer. You got it wrong and that's the end of the conversation. It's like, no, here's the concept. And let's really critique, is this what our community needs?
The Black Futurist.
That's one small step for man.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Nia Abdullah. I'm the CEO and the principal consultant at Inspire Impact Consulting Group. I am a former educator and nonprofit leader and really excited to be here today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Hannah Oldham. I am a high school math teacher and I run the STEM Academy in Marietta at Spraberry High School. I am focused on making sure that we give our young women a space to feel safe in STEM.
Hey, Dr. Hannah.
Hey. Hey, Dr. Nia.
So what I see from a sort of whole organizational view or like an entire educational system or a district is that things like AI can make life easier, can help the teachers to be a lot more efficient in how they grade, hopefully can be a lot more consistent, can help building leaders to do evaluations at a much quicker pace with much more nuanced feedback, but then also calibrated so that there is less unevenness in the results. What do you think?
Yeah, AI is not going anywhere.
Absolutely.
So I think about this in my trajectory as an educator of a new piece of technology shows up and educators immediately get scared of it.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we can go back as graphing calculators, right? Back in the olden days that we don't even use those anymore because our phones do so much. But for math specifically, graphing calculators were, oh my God, kids won't learn anything. They're just going to rely on the graphing calculator. But what we learned is all of a sudden we created 14-year-old computer programmers because they figured out programming through trying to cheat with a graphing calculator. But look at how much education that they were able to get with this new technology. So rather than saying a no calculator system, letting teachers know that it's not scary. It's not going to take away mathematics. It's going to increase our chance for exploration because technology is invented by one group of people for a specific purpose.
Right.
But it grows when new people push what it can do.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think that when we start talking about AI, and I think there's a lot to talk about in terms of education here, but rather than trying to make it go away, which it won't, let the kids who are true innovators, what can you do with AI that we didn't even think to do? Like, program Mario as a video game into, a graphing calculator.
Absolutely. And so I think about, high school principals, because I was a principal for 7 years. And how do you bring these scary technologies into a building? You need a committee of people like you and some students and some parents, all who are already excited about the technology, who can then explore and pilot and then introduce it to their peers. Because as a former teacher as well, I don't want to hear from anyone except for another math teacher who has already used the technology and can give me all the shortcuts and all the ins and outs of how to use it well and how to really have impact and to engage the young people. It's the same thing as a principal. I want to hear from other principals. I want to know, how are you handling this new technology? How are you handling the ethics of AI in your building? How have you transformed your plagiarism codes and all of those kinds of things so that we can embrace the technology, but also understand its impact and the consequences of using it if we're not really thoughtful about how we introduce it into the classroom and into a school building in a district.
I love your comment about being thoughtful about it because, and also community, right? It's not, with anything in education, it is community involvement.
Absolutely.
How I come up with, our school policies should be a conversation about what does our local school district need? What do our kids need? Why aren't we talking to the kids themselves? Like I said, it's not going to go anywhere. And actually, we need to embrace the fact that these students need to explore AI because they're going to be the ones shaping its use. They're going to be the ones programming it, putting the data in and what it can do. And when you make it seem that it's a bad guy, we're not ever having a chance to look at all the amazing things it can do. But it comes with a top-down approach. You have to get the teachers comfortable enough to explore with the student.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so how I approach that work all the time is, who's the committee? Because there's always some people in a building, in a district, who are already excited about the new technology. They're on top of it. They're using it in their classroom already. Put them on the committee and have them teach the other teachers and to teach the principal. Here's how I use it. Here's what I've found can hurt the classroom. And here's what has really helped us to really engage in it well and to do new exciting things that we may not have been able to do because of the inefficiencies of older methods. And then really thinking about also, how can we bring the community into the work? Because if you think about educational equity, right?
Yeah.
With graphing calculators as a prime example.
Exactly.
So many math students didn't have access. So then they have to do systems of equations by hand all the time. And they can't really do a lot of comparison work in how functions work because they're so busy doing the grueling handwork and they're not able to quickly look and compare. And so it's the same thing with AI. If we have schools that aren't using it at all, they're at a complete disadvantage, especially heading into college when it's all over the college campus.
Yeah.
So many students are using it. So if I've never used it, I'm really at a disadvantage for editing my papers or for just understanding new emerging information that's out there that I could access. So
I want to come back to that point you made about educational equity.
yes,
Because the graphing calculator's a great point. I make jokes about Texas Instruments. They are still $100. I don't know how they've kept that price point with inflation, but every decade they're the same. But it's $100.
Right.
And that's not something that everybody can afford. And so we talk about the need for innovation. So what happened when we couldn't afford graphing calculators? Well, then we started making apps that would do the graphing calculator work that were free.
Yep.
And now we can talk about the idea of how accessible are smartphones, but they're pretty ubiquitous at this point, I think. Not completely, but more students have access to a phone that can download an app than an extra graphing calculator, which they'll lose because it's 3 times the size of their phone. The kids aren't going to lose their phone, right?
In their pocket.
But that innovation was necessary because how do I compete with other people who have these graphing calculators, like you said, doing it by hand without this? And what's interesting is the most common one is Desmos, the free online graphing calculator. But what the founder has done is something super great. There's so much you could learn about him. He actually partnered with some hard of hearing deaf students because they're like, we can't necessarily see or hear, and some blind students as well. And they figured out how to not only do visuals of the functions and amplitudes of signs, but they found ways to do how it would sound.
Oh.
And like, just so like, I wouldn't even think to do that, but because they're bringing in people into the conversation, talking about those things. But because they're so committed to making that education free, is that they partnered with so many school districts. So now on state tests, Desmos is embedded as the graphing calculator.
Brilliant.
So now my
Brilliant.
students we don't have to check out the one class set of calculators. And it's the software they're familiar with.
Brilliant.
Because that commitment in it, and that's coming back to your comment about community, that's a high community leader that is so committed to making sure, how do we give this access to everyone? And you can see that top-down accessibility.
And we have to do more of that.
Mhm.
We definitely have to do more of that. I don't have another question at the moment.
God.
In 2 different high school districts in Illinois, I was able to lead the charge to have pre-engineering and advanced manufacturing labs built. And the idea was, how can we help young people, especially ones who may be tactile learners, kinesthetic learners, et cetera, have access to the most advanced technologies, or maybe not the most advanced because it is a public school, of course, right? But to advanced technologies and to be able to really begin to understand design work. How can I say, this is what I want to create, and then have the ability to create a physical, tangible product of my vision? And so what I found was that was really eye-opening for a lot of boys, especially because they were seeing that math is not just on pen and paper or on the computer. It is physical, tangible things that they can create using the mathematics that they've learned. So that has been amazing. What was hard, of course, is in any school district, there's always the bureaucratic red tape.
Yes.
But if you're able to get the community to understand the vision, then they will begin to create the groundswell for how to move anything that's that massive, like bringing in a whole new advanced manufacturing lab with 3D printers and lathes and welding machines and all of those things that can really create this manufacturing pipeline. It's not easy to do if the community does not understand it. And so I was able to really build that community support by having lots of conversations with all the parents and the community leaders and the elected officials, and that really helped us to move the needle on that. And I think the students are better off because of it.
Yeah, I think community is just such an not valued, but underutilized importance in innovating in our communities. Our community members, if you think, the biggest community members are going to be the parents of the kids.
Absolutely.
And all they want is the most success in career, education, opportunities for their kids. And I think so often we start from a place of headbutting rather than going, all of us are here for the
We
kid.
want the same thing.
Right? So, I joke with the kids some days when they're like, oh, pop a quiz or a homework. And they're like, yes, every day I wake up going, how can I make you mad today? Like, no, of course not. I am a teacher because I love it. And your parents love you.
Right.
And if we have more conversations from a point of being open,
Right.
I think that we don't use that enough. We're scared of it, I think, maybe as educators. But also coming back to the space you created, in elementary school, there's so much room for play.
Yeah. Yes.
Exploration.
Yes.
Go to the media center, go to the different labs that you have and do free exploration.
Right.
And then in high school, it's gone.
It's gone.
And you talk about why kids don't like school. And I'm like, we've pulled out the innovation. We pulled out the play.
Yep.
Having spaces like that, and I have a similar space, nothing that massive. It's honestly a chemistry closet that we put some shelves in and ask community members for donations of you'll be like, oh, I've got some old tools. I've got some old circuit boards. I've got some 3D printers. I've got an old monitor. And so it's this ragtag situation, but there's wires and batteries everywhere. So kids feel that they can explore
Right.
without going, well, I don't have the supplies, or I only get one chance, or I had this idea. And you also see the kids play and talk to each other, coming back to that math. The 3D printers, the stuff I've seen is incredible. I had an example where the students were trying to 3D print the Master Sword from Zelda. And they had gotten a file and they were adjusting it. And they had to print it in pieces. And the pieces weren't right because we couldn't fit it on our printer.
Right.
So they started doing and having these conversations about ratios and proportions to extreme detail level, and then switching between, well, is it going to be better to be in standard, metric? And I was just like standing off to the side, and I didn't want to tell them how proud I was of them for math because I knew they'd be like, no, I don't want to do the math. And I'm like, you're doing all of the things we want you to get out of this by giving them access to play.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then also thinking about just real problems. So I had a physics teacher at Bowen High School, Jason Gray. And so there were areas in the school building. It was a very large, old building. And there were security cameras in lots of places, but there's always a few
Sure.
blank spots or areas that have no coverage.
Mhm.
So the young people in his physics class used Raspberry Pis, and they created their own little cameras in the hot spots that had no coverage. And they were excited because, A, they're solving a problem in the
Yes.
school, right?
In their community.
And in their community, helping to create a safer space for everyone, but using the technology to do it. It was amazing. So then that was more than a decade ago.
Yeah.
So then after that, I went into working at a nonprofit that really focused on how can we help young people understand the public health disparities impacting their community, use data analytics and a little bit of data science to understand how to solve that problem, and then research what has happened to create that current state in the community. If we think about disparities in access to healthy food, if we think about diabetes disparities, anything of that sort, they had to research the history of it. Then they had to create data collection tools in order to collect information in the community about habits in the community or what the community prioritized, and then use all that information to help to present a solution to the problem. What I found in any kind of like real world problem solving, they will do so much more than a typical classroom assignment.
Yeah.
They will go much deeper. They get a lot more excited, and they're more willing to do the stats and the programming and all the hard stuff that usually is not that exciting because they're trying to solve a problem in their own community. Have you used anything like that in your classrooms?
I'm so glad you brought that up because, again, it's this theme that keeps coming. And it's like, well, if all of us are talking about it, why don't we see more of it, right?
Absolutely.
But I teach a class called AP Research, and it's for seniors. And the short of it is basically doing what you would do at a master's level thesis, where you have to identify a problem, do a full literature review based on peer-reviewed journals. Teaching them the importance, and it's all of these implicit soft skills that no other course has specifically stated. Now, if you get a good teacher in your English class, they'll teach you what an abstract, right? They can teach you what a journal is, but that's not specifically a standard.
Right.
So when do we teach students what is the difference between a CNN article and a peer-reviewed journal from the APA, right?
Absolutely.
And so they have to take all of these things. They're learning what it means to be an expert in a field, synthesizing that, finding the missing piece. Okay, well, you said this and you said this, but no one talked about the intersectionality of a young Black woman in that space.
Right.
So there's my missing piece. How do I research that? And that leads to what you're saying is that they find value in it. You know, where do I have a problem? What is something I've always wanted to know, but it's not out there?
Right.
But then by the time they graduate, because they had to develop a methodology, they have to learn research method. They have to understand what it means to write, open and close questions on a survey on a Likert scale, and how you biased or unbiased you can do that. Or if you're going to do a control group, what does that mean? They have to learn IRB review. I didn't understand what an IRB was until I was way deep in my master's program.
Absolutely.
But what it sets these students up for, is they get that connection. They want to do the hard work. Is that when they enter college as an undergrad, they have the level of expertise about scholarly innovation and research as an 18-year-old.
Yep.
That they can get on these, the one undergrad on
Assistant research.
the research committees because they know what to do and they feel safe in that. Because it also forces them that they've been writing and presenting.
Right.
Is giving them the confidence to be like, yeah, you know what you're talking about. Talk about it. You're an expert now. You have that confidence to be in this space.
And then if you add in a little bit of R programming and a little bit of Python, then they're really head and shoulders above anyone who's coming in as a freshman undergrad.
Right.
And they can really get that research assistantship position that oftentimes is not available until you're in grad school. And oftentimes is not available to minority students who haven't had that exposure. So it can be absolutely life-changing.
Right. And those are the things that are not in a curriculum. And we talk about like having access to 3D printers and things like that. But I think one of the things that we need to make sure that we're doing is like all of those things are great, but it's the soft, non-standard skills that create our future innovators.
Right.
Making them feel safe to fail.
fail.
I think it's
To
like
fail. Absolutely.
And knowing that you're not going to innovate unless you fail, and failure should be celebrated. But when we only give students access to classes that are standards-based,
Right.
that are 4.0 grade scale,
Right.
that they go, well, I'm going to take the easy way out. I'm not going to innovate because if I fail, then my GPA is hurt, then I can't get into the college. If I can't get into the, and it's a trickle-down thing. Where it's like, no, if you go to college without a 4.0, but you have all of this, you're getting the internships. You're getting those research opportunities. And in college, it's about GPA, but like, I don't know what my undergrad GPA was. I don't know. I can't remember. But I remember my internships and my field experience and things like that. So giving them that experience earlier
Right.
is the thing that makes them future innovators.
Then really thinking about how can we help teachers really create these open-ended projects where there's no clear right and wrong answer. It's all about the methods. It's all about the innovation. It's all about learning new information and then building off of that information, helping to steer the research or the innovation in a new direction. So it's not just, here's the right answer. You got it wrong, and that's the end of the conversation. It's like, no, here's the concept, and let's really critique, is this what our community needs?
Yeah.
Is this the right approach? Is this scalable? Is this right? Is this ethical? So that they really begin to think about real world issues and what will help them to be really head and shoulders above others in the career space and the undergraduate space.
Right. And I think, again, that's so important about like knowing there isn't a right, this is a problem and there's not a solution. So how do we do this? And they'll look to you as the teacher and you go, I don't know. So I run a club called Girls Who Code. It's a national nonprofit organization, one of the biggest in the country, committed to making sure that young girls have a sisterhood and are committed to fostering them through STEM. So there's elementary school levels, there's high school, there's college, and then they work really hard on internships, job interview skills at the higher level, but just giving that space to make sure that we don't lose young women in the STEM pipeline, which is a major problem. So Girls Who Code creates this safe space for girls to work in computer science, work in that space, without feeling singled out.
Right.
So one of the things that I do every semester at the start of every club is I go, what's the problem in our community and how can we fix it with computer science? And one of the biggest things that happened was a few years ago, our biggest fundraiser for our school, for our PTSA, is our craft show. It's a 2-day event. It basically funds the entire PTA for the entire year. We get like 200 crafters. We always do it around Thanksgiving. So there's lots of like holiday stuff. People sell candy, sell knitted things, art, etc. And we have been doing it for so long, everything was still just paper. The map was paper. Any flyers that went out were in the newspaper. The crafters had to send in paper checks through mail to register.
And what year was this, Hannah?
Oh, it was right after COVID, so it would have been 2020.
Oh my goodness.
And we were still paper. And our students volunteer with this every year. And they're like, it's crazy because I try and help people and they'll ask like, well, where's the website? And they're like, here's a hand-drawn map of the school. And it's like, so they said, if this is our biggest fundraiser for the school, we need this because it also funds student scholarships, teacher grants. Like, we need a website. And so what an amazing experience that is. And it continues. We keep doing it every year and making it bigger and better. Is we contacted the person who runs it. We got the list of all of the crafters. We sorted them by what they craft. We got websites up to link their websites with ours. One of our students finally went and made a digital copy of the map.
Our GIS, hopefully.
Oh my gosh. So let me tell you, talk about innovation. A student at the time, we did not have school laptops. She only had a phone with a broken screen. She hand drew the map. She took a picture of it and then hand drew the map to make a digital format of it on her broken phone because that's what you have access to. You wouldn't know when you look at that website that was hand drawn on a broken phone. And then we were able to link all of those things and, the crafters' emails. So if someone wanted to come back, so it's year long, right? So if you bought fudge from a place and then all of a sudden it's June and you're like, what was the name of that? You can go to the website and find that. Crafters can register on that website. And what was crazy was we launched it down to the wire. And again, soft skills. We have a deadline. This event is happening. It has to work. I feel like it's not working. It has to. And they had to learn how to talk to crafters that didn't get, like consumers be like, well, can it do this? And they're like, no, it can't. And then they'd be like, well, I don't have an email. And they go, well, where do you want me to put a contact? Like, can you put my mailing address? Or like, no. But then talking, getting a lot of feedback. And we ran the event and they actually got to talk to the crafters who would be like, this is incredible. We love this website. We're getting so much business. But then also things are like, well, this didn't work. My link doesn't work. Can you fix that? So my girls are walking around with laptops like through the school fixing it. But they feel such a sense of accomplishment.
Absolutely.
And they also know that it's not working. So fix it. They're like, I don't know how. I don't know how. Fix it. And you see them do the things we do as adults. Google it. Right? Like, but they wanted to do it. They knew what it was for. They knew the importance. It was their own community. And again, all of those skills that take them so far that are not in a standard that's created.
It really goes back to something that is more than just a grade.
Yeah.
Right? It's more than just a teacher asking you to complete a task.
Mm-hmm.
It's for a larger audience.
Right.
And they're more willing to do the revisions. No one likes revisions initially,
No.
but you do the revisions for your client. You do the revisions for the customer or the community or the parent who's asking and saying, this isn't quite right.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to get it right. And those are the skills that we know they need. I work with an organization and we put on a scientific symposium every year.
Mm-hmm.
And the young people had to create 2 different solutions for community problems.
Okay.
And they had to do all the research methods, all of the survey collection, but they had to create a survey, but then they had to go out into the community and actually get answers.
And I'm sure that was
Those are
brilliant.
soft skills. We had to teach them. You can't take the rejection personally, but that's life. You keep going. All right, well, thank you so much for your time. And you stay pleasant, and then you find a new person. At the end of the day, you need 20 surveys every day.
Yeah.
How are you going to do it? All right, well, do you need a new location? Because maybe this location does not have the foot traffic that you thought it did. But it's forcing them to really think about, how can I get the results I need to be able to present great data to my community in order to make my argument for a answer to a problem the most compelling out of everyone else's?
Right. And they'll want to do those. They don't just be like, my teacher made me do a research thing and then I asked 20 people and 10 of them responded, so I'm just going to do 10 data points. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, no, are you kidding me? A joke I always tell the kids I was like, okay, we have 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
You got in a car accident on the way here. I didn't. 50% of the people on this podcast crashed their cars. 50% of people on any podcast crash course. Okay, so I'm not lying, but my data set's 2. So the math's not wrong,
Right.
but how are you using it? And I think that especially for our minority communities who have been on the wrong side of data analysis for too long,
Right.
get a chance to understand and ask those questions, be like, well, what was your sample size? Right? How did you get that? Did you just ask questions? Was it an experiment? Was it double blind? Was it a survey? What survey questions did you ask? Were they open-ended? Were they closed? Because they need that experience. But the value, the same thing with my students, they go out and be like, when I asked them, what their age was, they said 462. It's like, yeah, people are people, and you're gonna have that. So like you said, so how do we fix that? But they want to.
Yeah.
Because they are invested in the problem.
Yes. And then you add in having to present your finding to a broader audience. And then that makes them want to keep practicing their lines, keep looking at their data visuals to make sure everyone in the audience can understand it, making sure that the scale and the axes are right. And so it's those little things that they may not want to do just for the grade. It's like, okay, I'm fine with the B minus,
right,
Dr. Hannah. I'm okay with it. But if their community is in front of them, if their peers are in front of them and they have a mic in front of their hands, right, or in their hands, they want to make sure it's right. And they want to take the time to really do the extra work and to go even deeper so that they have the most compelling argument.
Right.
And those are the soft skills that aren't always in the curriculum, like you said.
Yeah. And that's why, coming back again to AP research, a lot of schools don't necessarily offer it because it doesn't necessarily give you a college credit because it's a soft skill class. Like, what is that, English 101? No, it's not an English class. Is it a social studies class? Well, it's not a history class. It's not political science. It's not a math class. So colleges don't know how to give kids credit for it. So they don't. And then we're so obsessed with this college credit GPA thing that students go, well, if I'm not going to get college credit for this AP class, I'm not going to take it.
Right.
And it's like the one chance where there is stuff in standards
Right.
to teach those soft skills.
Right.
And it still is not quite being embraced of all of the things it could offer.
Right.
The biggest way, talking about trust, to make sure that we have people that want to innovate, because they're always going to have those special teachers that are going to want to do it anyway. But how do we get more people to trust us to try the AI, to do things like that? With anything, I think it starts at the school level. How do you get the kids to trust you? How do you get the kids to want to feel safe to fail? Going back to my club that I have, Girls Who Code, is being a woman in STEM, how unsafe I've felt in certain environments. And I think that that's not news, well, at least not to women in the field. But how do we let our students trust us to explain what it means to be a woman in STEM right now, but know that it's okay and you have support? And that's why I think spaces like Girls Who Code is so important, because we lose kids, at my level, the high school level, is that they are afraid to apply to colleges or afraid to even apply to computer science or STEM fields because I'm going to be the only girl.
Right.
I might be harassed. I don't know how to work in this space. I feel singled out. I don't belong here. I'm not smart enough. And it's because they've never had a space where it's a trusting, safe environment to feel represented. And one of the things that I try and make sure they do is I work with the Loops program. So our high school girls get looped, paired up with a college. And so the college girls can come and talk. And we create these environments where my high school girls feel safe. They
Right.
trust that space to go, what happens when you're the only girl?
Right.
Or are you the only girl? And they'll go, yeah.
I wish I had, or I knew about, or I was aware of, or I was involved in Girls Who Code when I was in undergrad. So I was an electrical engineering major. I had lots of internships, but I was the only so many times. I was the only woman, the only African-American, the only Abdullah last name. And so there was no one who took me under their wing, There was no one who helped me to see that there was a pathway. There weren't any older women who were in the space either. There weren't any African Americans in the space either. So I ended up in education because I just didn't feel welcome in the space. I wish I could have been a trailblazer back then, but I wasn't ready at the time. And so Girls Who Code is so important to young people like the young girl I was who didn't have a sense of belonging in the STEM space at that time.
Yes.
I went to a historically Black university, so Howard University, awesome school. So I felt welcome in that space, but in the work environment, I didn't. So really thinking about that. I love your near-peer mentorship idea. We did that at another organization I worked with. It was all about having grad students to mentor the undergrads to mentor the high school, and then having faculty to lead all of that. And so going back to thinking about community and trust, it's really having also academic researchers when they want to study, broadening participation in STEM and all of those kinds of things where there's lots of funding, they have to learn to not be extractive of the community. And after the 3-year grant is over, how do we continue the program?
Right.
I hate to see where you have huge university, great research, and they come in and they have a great program for 3 years, and then the funding ends and they leave and we never hear from them again.
Right.
So that really hurts trust. And so the same way that we have to do it in the school with the young people and the parents, we have to do it in the community with the academic researchers so that they know if you're coming to work in the community and to help the community, you have to make sure there is a great sustainable plan for how the programming continues even after the funding ends. And I think that is a key trust issue in our communities oftentimes.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because while throwing money at a situation doesn't fix it, you can't throw money and then get good results and go, now I can write my paper. Right. And that's a problem. So when I'm looking back at that continued support, is making sure we have that, taking a step back from the funding for a second, but just making sure that we have that longevity of, I feel safe in this place.
Right.
So it's not just at one level, my high school girls have to feel safe to go into college to want to be in those spaces. But let's take even a step back and let our elementary school girls know that when you get up to high school, you will still have a space. This isn't just in elementary school. Played with Spheros and did some scratch coding, never to be heard of again.
Right.
And that's where you have to make sure, though, like, do you have one at your elementary school? Do you have one at your middle and high? But trying to make sure we have that connection. So my high school girls will go down to the elementary school and do their STEM days, and they just pair up together.
Fantastic.
And there's so much value. Our sports teams do it all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Our football team goes down, with their pads on. The kids are like, yeah, I want to grow up to be a Sprayberry Yellow Jacket and play football. Okay, so why aren't we being like, yeah, I want to grow up and be a Girls Who Code computer engineer?
Absolutely.
And the other really, just coming back, thinking about that Girls Who Code space, is that while the computer science is great, and I could teach coding classes, we've been talking about the importance of non-standards, right? So while we do websites, we do coding, so much more is the feeling safe, having that environment. Once a week, we're going to get here, do some STEM. We're going to do computer science. Am I following a lesson plan? But I do want to mention, Girls Who Code has amazing lesson plans. So if you don't feel comfortable having that open space, there is fantastic
plenty of stuff you can do
to do it. But the most important is that trust. How do we get people to feel safe to fail?
Right.
Especially, oh my gosh, in computer science.
Right.
I've written thousands of lines of code and it's not working. I have no idea where it is. I remember specifically a story that I was working with a student and we just could not get this image to load. And it was driving us crazy. We'd spent, as you do with going through code, an hour. And we realized that instead of IMG for image, we did IGM. And you just go through it so fast and don't see it until finally someone was able to find it. But that's what computer science is.
Mm-hmm.
And making sure they feel safe to go, no, you're doing it right. By doing it wrong, you're doing it right.
And then also just thinking about how do they handle the microaggression? How do they handle the untoward gesture, right? And giving them the armor and the tools to handle it in a professional, calm, and cordial way, and to understand to expect it.
Yes.
And here's how you handle it, and then here's who you can come and talk to after class or after work to help you to process it.
It's, oh my gosh, that is, I mean, yeah, as two women in STEM, knowing it exists. It's not away yet. Now I'm hoping, I've got great confidence in Gen Z that they're going to help us with that. But as they enter the workforce, it's there.
Yep.
And one of the other things, I tell my girls about using their big girl voice.
Absolutely.
And when a woman uses her big girl voice, she's bad. She's mean. She's evil. And
She's the B word.
She's the B word. When a man uses
He's a
the
leader.
big voice, he's a leader. He's an alpha.
Assertive.
Yeah. And I go, know that that's what it is. But know that when you use your big girl voice, you're leaving the ladder down.
Yep.
And all the other women in that room see you doing it.
Yep.
And are willing to climb the ladder up with you.
Right.
And also making sure that our young women feel good to be feminine. Wear the dress.
Yep.
Put on heels and makeup. You don't have to dress down. You don't have to be masculine in a space just to feel you can fit in.
Right.
You know, and look, there's plenty of days where I'm not putting on a dress and makeup and doing the whole thing. But you should never feel that you have to lose your femininity just to be in the STEM space.
Right.
And making them feel safe from an early on,
Right.
what that feels like,
Right.
what they're going to experience to prep them so they don't want to leave the field. So they don't get into college and go, I feel unsafe and I don't have someone to talk to.
And I don't belong.
Yeah.
Which is the worst thing.
Yes.
And to really be able to say, I belong in the space.
Mhm.
And the reason that I am of value is because I am different.
Yeah.
Because I am a woman, because I'm feminine. I have a different perspective on the technology that can be useful to the entire team. And that's why we want to include more people who don't just look like the same thing.
Yes.
We have to have diverse voices at the table. That will make the technology so much better, so much more advanced, useful, user-friendly. When we have more users
Mhm.
who are different,
Yes.
using it and giving feedback on it.
I want you to imagine what the education system might be or have to be in the Star Trek, the Next Generation universe, right? Like, so far into the future that money is not even a concept anymore. We've entered this utopian, dystopian, reality, and where we live maybe is utopian-ish, okay? What are the frictions to us getting there, and what are the opportunities that are unlocked on the way there?
So in our future innovation, in perfect utopia, we found the panacea. We have fixed education. It's finding that balance between content and exploration. I don't think that we can just let kids explore from early on without any type of structure.
Right.
There are, and I can have philosophers debate me on this, but some facts are facts.
Right.
Numbers, 2 + 2 is 4. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Right.
Right.
And so there's certain things, we have history dates. We can argue about what happened in those history, and that's important. But there is a balance between too much content and letting kids explore more on those. I think as adults, it's such an easy thing that we explain to adults when you get excited about something and all of a sudden you're down a YouTube trail and you're following all those things because you wanted to learn about it, but you wouldn't have learned about it unless you had some basis.
Right.
So if we can find the balance of making sure we've got content enough to drive exploration. And the problem is, and I think one of the biggest steps, and I do not have an answer for this one, is the people who are in charge of saying, what are the content standards? And that's a completely, we could do a full mini series on that, I think, because you have so many different people who claim they're experts. Sometimes they are, about not only what content is important, but when we teach it, how we teach it,
Right.
but utopia level, students have that balance of, I understand enough information of the facts I need to be able to explore and create and innovate based on my passions and interests and my own expertise.
So I agree with you 100%. We have to have guidelines. And in an ideal world or in this utopia, we get the young people to work on problems and they can have conversations across the globe and to really, really collaborate in ways that we're not quite seeing on the high school level or the elementary level yet. And so having them to say, well, we're having the same issues in Ghana that we're having in my community.
Right.
So then how can we have a research group of Ghanaian young people and American young people really tackling a problem together using all the technology that helps them to be able to collaborate and to have asynchronous learning or what have you, so that they're able to tackle, but then also able to just create more understanding
What's that
of
community?
different cultures, understanding different communities. So I see the utopia as we're not so separated, right? Neighbors do not have to be next door neighbors. Neighbors can be across the globe because we're able to learn about each other. We're able to get to know each other, even if we're not in each other's physical space. And we're able to teach each other different ways of approaching problems from all these different lenses.
Yes.
And so that's what's exciting. There's so many ethical challenges in everything having to do with technology, as we know. And so we definitely have to have the guidelines on the how and the what. We have to have great problems that everyone is interested in solving, or not everyone, but a lot of people, so that you have a groundswell of support around, yes, let's tackle this. This is a great topic, and this is how we're able to come together to solve it. Here are the technology or the technological tools that we're able to use and that we're able to learn in the process. And these are all the soft skills we're also able to learn in the process in getting to know these different cultures. So that would be really exciting to me.
And I just was reminded when you were talking about that is that the UN has their 17 sustainability goals.
Right.
And I've done a project with a group called Girls Who Game. And we picked one of the UN sustainability goals that they had to solve using Minecraft. And so they
kids
had
love
to
Minecraft.
create a whole world after doing research, but then create a world that would be a utopia that would solve a specific UN sustainability thing. We have a list of worldwide problems, like you mentioned. But I just love that the thing is like, okay, here's a worldwide problem. How could we solve it? Minecraft, and they have agency, they have fun. But getting to learn new things, again, a problem. How do I make water move up and down in let me try this. So, but I love that.
I love the gamification in education right now. It makes it a lot more fun. It gives those, gamers their expert position in the classroom, which is really cool as well.
Hi, I'm Dr. Hannah Oldham. I am a 16-year veteran public school teacher in math and STEM. I present nationally across the country talking about finding spaces for young women in STEM through Girls Who Code, Girls Who Game, and other various organizations.
Hi, my name is Dr. Nia Abdullah. I am the CEO of Inspire Impact Consulting Group. I am a former high school educator. I was a math teacher, and I was also a high school principal and a nonprofit leader. I help organizations to really improve their impact in historically marginalized communities and help to build up the organizational capacity of each of those organizations. It's so good to be here.